Well, as we've been reporting, a man who has lived in Australia for decades is set to be deported to the UK after an appeal against his visa cancellation was rejected. In 2019, Stephen Pokrykwa was convicted for attempting to supply methamphetamine and was sent to a detention centre after spending 5 years in prison. For more on this, I'm joined now by lead campaigner in the case, Gerry Georgatos. Gerry, thank you very much for your time this evening. Stephen is scheduled to be deported at any minute now. When was the last time you heard from him?
The last hour, so I've been talking to him throughout the day. In 15 minutes, his plane will more than likely take off in 15 minutes. The Prime Minister has the opportunity to intervene in right or wrong. This individual, Stephen Pokrykwa, is a single carceral sentence. One conviction. We're now demonising people with one conviction, character assassination instead of character assessment. The Prime Minister needs to right or wrong and intervene and get him off that plane and keep him in Australia for his 6 Australian-born and bred children and his 10 Australian-born and bred grandchildren. His mother's an Australian, she's got citizenship. His sister was born in this country and another sister has citizenship. He has no one in the UK. He's been 44 years in this country. He's committed one offence. He's received a carceral sentence of 5 years. He developed a late-in-life addiction, and that led to aberrance, and he's righted the wrong since then, and he's served his penance and done what the court ordered. We're now acting extrajudicially and aggregating all sorts of people to 1,000 people being deported a year for 8 out of the last 10 years and hundreds in the last 2 years, up from about 50, 60 and 70 a year, every year since the turn of the century, to one of the highest rates of deportation of people on permanent stay visas that have been permanent residency visas that have been revoked on the grounds of character assassination, which is what I call it instead of character assessment. He is the last and the least. I've represented 22 people over the years with these 501 character assessments, and I've been able to succeed with 21 of the 22 revocations of the cancellation of the visa and the reinstatement of their visas. He's the only one that's been a single carceral sentence, and yet I've got other people off with multiple carceral sentences. At this stage, we have a race to the bottom. We are at the bottom. This political stoush between the coalition and the government on who's tougher on individuals who have committed offences and served their time, but they've served their time and we've got to give a clean slate. And everybody's trying to outslay each other, and he's now a sacrifice for vote-buying exercises that are an abomination and a hideous reprehension, and we should be better than this. And I beg and I plead, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, intercede and help right or wrong as you have in the past. Don't let a political stoush and vote-buying exercises demean this nation.
So, Gerry, what has Stephen had to say in the last hour when you spoke to him?
He's shattered. I've been mentoring him all day long. He's broken down in tears. Yesterday we were in the federal court appealing through the rights of his 12-year-old child to have a father in this country to nurture her, to not shred the family. He's broken-hearted. He broke down yesterday after the federal court appeal, which was a last shot, throw of the dice, considering the circumstance. He should be out on clemency and pardon, and he shouldn't have been in this predicament whatsoever. We are aggregating all sorts of circumstance and homogenising the deportation risks and deporting people at the highest rates. He's upset. He's devastated. He's going to be transient in a foreign country with penniless and at risk of suicidality, and his children are at risk of suicidality. A 12-year-old fatherless without a father, a 21-year-old without a father, and 4 other children without their father. All have been broken to tears. I've been talking to each and every one of them, and he's just devastated and worried for his kids, and they've not got a father and a provider at this time. He's worked all his life. He had an aberrance. He's not a career recidivist. He's not a career offender. But how he's got to this is a state of affairs that we need to look at, which is our nation has become what it was with the Tampa and the CVEX, and we've got no Petro Georgia. I've reached out to 41 parliamentarians out of our 200-plus federal parliamentarians, 22 in the Labor Party. Not one of them has been able to do anything so far. And I've reached out to 4 of the Greens. They haven't been able to intercede and speak to the Immigration and Home Affairs ministers, and that's a disappointment. I've reached out to the Coalition, to 2 of them. I've reached out to the Teals and the Independents, and I've reached out to 40-plus all up, and not one of them has stood up. It's an abomination. We are at our lowest, and there's no Petro Georgiou.
Gerry, finally, what are the next steps once Stephen actually arrives in the UK, and are you confident that he will one day be allowed to return to Australia?
No, I'm not confident, because the reality is, Manning, if you're deported If you're deported, the likelihood is you will never return to Australia. You will never be granted a visa to return. It is less than rare. It's not. It's so rare. Rare is not even a word to describe the lack of possibility of him being returned to Australia, unless we get the visa overturned, because we will be proceeding to the High Court. The visa revocation, and his circumstance is predictive of the possibility of that, then he may be able to return. But he spoke to his mother as if it will be the last time he sees her. He spoke to his father as if it'll be the last time he speaks to him. He spoke to his children and with the likelihood of never being able to see them in person again. He's 55 years of age and he's expected to survive in the country. There'll be accommodation for him for 5 days. There'll be no accommodation after that. He'll be transient. We'll do what we can to support him from people that we know in the UK. But the fact that he won't be able to see his children, and the fact that the likelihood, there's no propensity for him to be able to come back. The 1,000 deportations I talk about that have been each year, all 1,000 are not likely to ever see Australia again and their families. And I'm arguing for people who have tenure in this country. We had legislation at one stage that gave 10 years protection. If you've been in this country for 10 years, you weren't at risk of deportation. That's done away with. Now we had protections for at least 24 months of multiple 24 months of carceral sentencing, whether on a multiple basis or a single carceral sentence of 24 months. And if it was less than that, you couldn't be considered for deportation. And they've reduced that to 12 months. Nearly 600,000 Australians living have been to prison. Nearly 600,000 Australians living have been to prison. That's 2% of the Australian population. We are demonising them by proxy. We are demonising them that they're not entitled to redemption, salvation, that they're not entitled to life transformative, that they're not entitled to no longer be considered criminals. And we're actually demonising people because of an offence that they've served. We're not recognising the court-ordered sentence. We're not recognising the Prisoner Review Board in considering these people safe to release into the community without post-sentence supervision orders or indefinite stays till they further pose safety. But I know I've taken up your time. I plead to the Prime Minister, please step in. There's still 10 minutes to go. You can make that difference. This is righting a wrong. We shouldn't be in this predicament, and we've got to be better than this. We need leadership, not scaremongering.
Gerry Georgatos, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Manny.